Welcome to another episode of Bugs, Drugs, and Genomes. This is Krista, and I'm so glad to be back for another episode of the podcast as we dive into another fascinating aspect of AMR, global health, and capacity strengthening. Today, we're diving into the world of global capacity building. We're speaking with one of our bioinformaticians, Niamh Lacey-Roberts, about her experiences delivering in-country trainings in Africa through the Fleming Fund Seek Africa project, what she learned from working directly with local scientists, and why these efforts matter for the future of global health and AMR. And as a special bonus, we have a guest host as well, Pernille Nielsen, who also works on the Seek Africa project as a technical project manager.
Welcome, Niamh. It's lovely to have you here in the podcast studio. So before we dive into today's topic, could you briefly introduce yourself and your role as a bioinformatician in the Global Capacity Building Group?
Of course. Thank you so much, Pernille. So I've been working as a bioinformatician in the Global Capacity Building Group at DTU for about the past 3.5 years. My work focuses on antimicrobial resistance, microbial genomics, and I'm involved in everything from sequencing to, of course, analyzing the sequencing data, developing pipelines, and designing and delivering training. And a big part of my role is supporting labs globally to build sustainable bioinformatics capacity that can then be used for public health surveillance with a special focus on antimicrobial resistance surveillance and outbreak investigations.
Great. So what would you say sparked your interest in bioinformatics and global health work to begin with?
So I actually studied biomedical science during my undergraduate degree. And that's where I really became first interested in antimicrobial resistance and global health work. I was quite fascinated by how big and complex the problem of antimicrobial resistance is. It's really a global issue. It affects all of us. And there's also so much data involved. So that's what led me to pursue a master's in bioinformatics. I wanted to learn how to use all of that data, learn more about genomics, and try to support AMR surveillance in public health.
Great. And you've conducted these in-country trainings in Africa through the Seek Africa project. You got to travel to several African countries. Would you like to tell us what the main purpose of these trainings were?
Of course. I've been very fortunate to conduct trainings in Ghana, Zimbabwe, and Malawi. The main goal of these trainings was capacity strengthening, especially around the full whole genome sequencing workflow. So in Ghana, for example, we taught whole genome sequencing, so in the lab, as well as the bioinformatics. In Malawi and Zimbabwe, we were more focused on the bioinformatics part of the workflow. But overall, we were focusing on how to analyze and interpret genomic data for AMR surveillance. We were also focusing on building long-term sustainable skills. So we were focusing on things like quality control, genome assembly, bacterial typing, and of course, antimicrobial resistance detection. And the idea of these trainings, or kind of the ultimate goal, is that the data that's generated, maybe even during the trainings, but certainly afterwards, can be used directly for local surveillance and decision-making, and hopefully the knowledge will be continued to be shared with other students and scientists.
Great, and that's a very important point, that you keep training and learning and you're expanding this knowledge. So what was the most rewarding part of working directly with local scientists and students?
Wow. That's a great question. I mean, the whole experience, it's very rewarding, I think. I think one of the fantastic things is seeing how people gain confidence. Participants might start out thinking that bioinformatics is quite intimidating, especially if we're talking about working on the command line and not just online tools. But very quickly, we can see that participants start applying the methods and the skills we've taught to their own data, and asking really insightful questions. So, for example, when we were in Zimbabwe, we had participants that were interested in working on the command line, and we started with maybe just working with one tool, so how to run a genome assembly on the command line. But within that week, we had participants running whole workflows, so not just assembly, but also the quality control, also identifying different genes, AMR genes, and so on. And I think having in-person training really helps with that. It's much easier to build connections, have informal discussions, learn from each other, and also for participants to say, okay, we have a handle on the online tools, but can we actually focus on command line tools? So it's an opportunity to also be very flexible within the training and maybe change what we're teaching. And of course, when a participant, finally gets it and has that light bulb moment, I think that never gets old.
Yeah, that sounds amazing. When you see that spark and you see people really things are clicking and they're excited to learn more, that's an amazing feeling. So, were there any challenges you faced during these trainings, and how did you overcome them if you had challenges?
Yeah, definitely. I would say that we it's not uncommon to face challenges during trainings. I mean, really any place where you do trainings, but maybe specifically where there are constraints such as limited internet access or hardware constraints. And as I was previously saying, there can be mixed experience levels in the trainee groups. So of course, we try to overcome this by designing flexible, low resource friendly workflows, and also focus on practical problem solving. I mentioned before that in Ghana, we did some wet lab whole genome sequencing training. And sometimes a problem in these countries can be that it's hard to procure reagents and equipment for sequencing. So we actually, when we went to Ghana, we packed the kits with us in our suitcases. And that, worked really well for the purpose of the training until we could order some more reagents. And then again, in Malawi and Zimbabwe, where there was interest in working on the command line, then we just pivoted towards different kinds of tools and didn't focus too much on online methods. And I think as well, when there were internet constraints, then we can try to use maybe offline workflows instead of online workflows and so on. So I just think, it's important to be adaptable. And then, of course, work closely with the participants to adjust the training needs in real time.
That sounds like a very good approach. And I think you were more than one person training, so that also gave you some flexibility, I guess, maybe splitting up the group if not everyone were interested in command line, perhaps?
Exactly.
Okay. So how would you say that these trainings then have contributed to tackle antimicrobial resistance globally?
Oh, that's a great question. So I think that AMR surveillance, it really depends on actually strong local capacity. So when we're working with these labs and groups to generate and analyze high quality genomic data at the local level, then these trainings can really help to improve the early detection of resistance and also outbreaks. And then hopefully this data can be fed into national and global surveillance efforts, which will hopefully strengthen the global response to AMR.
Did you notice any difference in how bioinformatics is approached in African countries compared to Denmark, where you are trained?
So another great question. So I would say, of course, the underlying science is the same, right? But the context can be quite different. In some African labs, there might be a bigger focus on making things work under these resource constraints that we've talked about, such as limited internet or power. And this can very often lead to quite practical and creative solutions, such as offline or low resource workflows. So an example of this is we've been working with teams in Ghana, where we've done the wet lab training, specifically for a long read sequencing technology. We've worked together to implement an offline tool which will analyze the data, and it doesn't work on the cloud or anything like that. It works locally on the desktop. So that was a very good solution, where in Denmark we might just work with them kind of online in the cloud, but it works better for our colleagues in Ghana. And I think that it's a really good reminder that what matters most is whether an analysis is useful and actually actionable in that setting. And bioinformatics should be designed around the scientific question and the context, and it's not just about technical perfection.
Great answer, Niamh. Would you say, are there any skills or perspectives that you gained from these experience that you think DTU students should know about?
Oh, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of skills and perspectives for sure. Well, I think one of my biggest takeaways is learning how to do science that actually works in different and diverse settings. It's not just about our technical skills, but it's also important that you're able to adapt, collaborate with different people, and also listen. Sometimes it can be maybe easy to come in with technical expertise, and you might have ideas that you think are the best way to solve the issue or the problem or the challenge. But really, I think it's important to remember that the people on the ground, they understand the context best. They know what constraints are there. So it's really important to work closely with your international partners and colleagues, whether they're students or scientists, clinicians, and so on, and try to work together to build solutions with these people rather than actually for them. I think that's really important.
That's an excellent point, Niamh. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Do you have a funny story or any anecdotes from these trainings that you'd like to share?
Of course, I think we have lots of fun at these trainings. It's always great to see how excited and kind of ready to go people are. I'm not sure how many funny stories I have, but definitely a lot of wholesome stories of people working together. I was recently in Zimbabwe for one of these trainings during the summer, and we had bioinformaticians from all over the country suddenly in one room and working together. And we had lots of interesting discussions. And I think a big outcome of these discussions was that people realized how many potential synergies they have. So there might be one lab who's interested in doing long-read whole genome sequencing, and then another lab will say, oh, well, we have the equipment for you to do the sequencing, so you can come over and work with our equipment. So I think, again, it just shows how important it is to have people in one room for these trainings. I mean, you can have a lot more insightful and in-depth discussions than when you do them online.
That sounds amazing. And building a community of bioinformaticians while meeting and learning together.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So thank you so much, Niamh, for that fascinating conversation. It was lovely having you here in the podcast studio. We are just about ready to wrap up the episode. But before we go, I have a quick quiz, as always, for our lovely listeners.
Thank you, Pernille. And today's question is, why would you choose to use an offline tool?
So, A, you want to use your internet connection to watch YouTube.
B, you have limited internet connection.
C, your internet browser isn't working.
Okay, what could it be? Think about it. And the answer is B. Thank you all so much for joining us for another episode of Bugs, Drugs, and Genomes. Stay tuned for our next episode where we will talk again about exciting AMR-related news. We'll see you next time.